The gleaming Lamborghini dealership in the heart of Miami was a temple of wealth and luxury. Every inch of the space screamed opulence. The marble floors glistened under the bright showroom lights, the air was thick with the intoxicating scent of new leather, and the low hum of high-performance engines on display added an almost reverent undertone to the space. Wealthy clients, dressed in bespoke suits and designer dresses, moved through the showroom with the kind of ease that came from knowing they belonged. The double glass doors swung open, and Jack Reed stepped inside. He was a striking contrast to the polished environment. Dressed in a faded denim jacket over a flannel shirt, worn jeans and scuffed work boots, with a threadbare cap pulled low over his weathered face. He looked more like someone who had wandered off a farm than a man shopping for a supercar. Jack's gray-blue eyes scanned the room with a calm curiosity. He moved unhurriedly, his hands in his pockets as he strolled past rows of exotic cars. A Lamborghini Huracan in electric green caught his eye briefly, but he moved on. His focus landed on the centerpiece of the showroom, a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. Painted in a dazzling pearl yellow, the car sat like a golden idol on its pedestal, a masterpiece of engineering and design. Jack approached the car and let out a low whistle, running his fingers along the edge of the open driver's side window. The Aventador SVJ was a symbol of pure extravagance, with a 6.5-liter V12 engine capable of propelling it from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. A plaque on the pedestal read, "Price, $950,000. "Excuse me, miss," Jack said, turning toward a nearby salesperson. Sarah Evans, a sharply dressed woman in her late 20s, stood near the reception desk. Her black pencil skirt and crisp white blouse were perfectly tailored, and her stiletto heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached Jack. Her red lipstick matched the confident smirk on her face as she sized him up. "Yes," Sarah said, her tone clipped. Her perfectly arched brows raised slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe he was speaking to her. Jack gestured toward the Aventador. "Could I get the keys to this one? I'd like to sit in it and maybe start the engine." Sarah blinked, her smirk widening into a condescending smile. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You realize this isn't a test drive lot, right? These cars aren't for browsing." Jack's lips curved into a small, patient smile. "I'm not browsing, miss. I'm serious about this car. I'd like to see how it feels." Sarah laughed, a short, sharp sound that drew the attention of a few nearby customers. Dressed in tailored suits, they glanced over and exchanged amused looks, their gazes flicking between Jack's faded clothes and the gleaming supercar. "Sir," Sarah said, folding her arms, "this is a Lamborghini dealership. We don't hand over keys to... Well, let's just say that this car isn't exactly in the price range for..." Jack cut her off, his voice still calm. "And how would you know what my price range is?" Sarah's smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I think it's obvious," she said, gesturing vaguely to his attire. "Look, I don't mean to waste your time, but I really don't think this is the right place for you." Jack tilted his head slightly, his expression remaining composed. "You're making a lot of assumptions," he said. "I'd like to speak to someone else if you're not willing to help me." "I don't think that'll be necessary," Sarah said, her tone growing sharper. "I'm the senior sales consultant here, and I know when someone is wasting my time. I have actual clients to attend to." The quiet hum of the showroom grew heavier as the tension in the air thickened. Jack remained still, his hands resting casually in his pockets, while Sarah's irritation became more pronounced. A few of the other customers were now openly watching, their whispers carrying across the room. "Listen," Sarah continued, her voice rising slightly. "We have a reputation to uphold here, and frankly, you don't belong. So, if you wouldn't mind..." "I'll ask one more time," Jack said, his tone steady but firm. "The keys. Or should I be talking to someone else?" Sarah's face flushed, and her composure cracked. "That's it," she snapped. "I'm calling security." As she turned to signal for the security guard stationed near the entrance, Jack didn't flinch. He stood rooted in place, his calm demeanor an almost tangible force. The guard, a burly man with a sharp uniform, glanced between Sarah and Jack, his brow furrowing. For a moment, he hesitated, as if unsure whether to intervene. "Go on," Sarah said, her voice sharp with frustration. "Get him out of here." But the guard didn't move. Instead, he looked at Jack with a curious expression, as though sensing something beneath the surface of the man's unassuming appearance. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked Jack cautiously. "No problem at all," Jack replied evenly, his calm gaze fixed on Sarah. "Just trying to buy a car." The guard glanced at Sarah, his hesitation deepening. "Maybe we should get Mr. Lawrence," he suggested, referring to the dealership's owner. Sarah huffed, clearly frustrated but unable to ignore the guard's reluctance. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "Let's get Mr. Lawrence. But I can promise you, he's not going to waste his time with someone like you." She stormed off toward the office at the back of the showroom, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. Jack watched her go, his expression unreadable, and then turned back to the Aventador SVJ, his fingers brushing lightly over the sleek edge of the car. Around him, the room buzzed with muted whispers and speculative glances, but Jack seemed unaffected. He stood quietly, his calm presence a stark contrast to the growing tension. As Sarah Evans stormed toward the owner's office, the tension in the Lamborghini showroom was palpable. Customers in their tailored suits and designer dresses exchanged knowing glances, murmuring among themselves. The stark contrast between the opulence of the showroom and Jack Reed's unassuming appearance had transformed the scene into an unspoken spectacle. Jack, however, remained exactly as he was, standing calmly beside the gleaming Aventador SVJ, his weathered cap pulled low and his denim jacket sitting loose over his broad shoulders. He glanced at the car again, his fingers grazing the edge of the pristine yellow paint. The Lamborghini seemed to gleam brighter under the fluorescent lights, its angular design a sharp contrast to Jack's simplicity. The security guard shifted uncomfortably a few steps away. "Sir," he began hesitantly, I don't mean to intrude, but, this whole thing, are you sure you want to deal with it?" Jack turned to him with a small, polite smile. "Nothing to deal with," he said evenly. "Just here to buy a car." Before the guard could respond, Sarah returned, heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. Following closely behind her was Mark Lawrence, the dealership's owner. Mark was a tall man in his mid-40s, with sleek dark hair and an air of practiced charm. His tailored suit and polished demeanor exuded authority, and his sharp eyes scanned the room as he approached Jack. "Mr. Lawrence," Sarah began, her voice laced with exasperation. "This man has been wasting my time and causing a disruption. I tried to handle it, but Mark raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. He studied Jack carefully, his expression unreadable. There was a flicker of something in Mark's gaze, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of Jack's unwavering calm. "Good afternoon, sir," Mark said, extending a hand. "Mark Lawrence, owner of the dealership. How can I help you today?" Jack took Mark's hand in a firm but friendly grip. "Afternoon," he replied. "Name's Jack Reed. I was just asking to sit in this Aventador and maybe start the engine, but it seems your salesperson has some concerns." Mark shot Sarah a quick glance, his expression momentarily hardening. "I see," he said simply before turning back to Jack. "And you're seriously interested in this car?" Jack smiled faintly. "Serious as it gets." Sarah couldn't contain herself any longer. "Mr. Lawrence," she interrupted, her tone sharp. "With all due respect, we have a reputation to uphold. This isn't the kind of client we cater to." Mark's jaw tightened, but Jack only chuckled quietly, the sound low and unbothered. He glanced at Sarah, his expression still composed. "And what kind of client would that be?" he asked calmly. Sarah faltered, her face reddening slightly. "I mean, this dealership sells to professionals. People who—" "Sarah," Mark cut in, his tone icy. "That's enough." She fell silent, though her frustration was visible in the tight set of her jaw. Mark turned back to Jack, his demeanor professional. Mr. Reed, I apologize for any inconvenience. If you'd like to take a closer look at the Aventador, I'll make sure it's ready for you. Jack nodded, his calm smile unwavering. Much appreciated. Mark gestured for a technician to bring over the keys, and within moments, Jack was seated in the driver's seat of the Aventador SVJ. The buttery soft leather embraced him as his hands settled on the Alcantara steering wheel. The cabin, with its sleek design and digital displays, felt like a cockpit, every detail meticulously crafted for the ultimate driving experience. Mark stood nearby, watching closely as Jack familiarized himself with the car's interior. Sarah lingered a few steps away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression a mix of irritation and disbelief. Jack glanced up. Keys? He asked, his tone polite but firm. The technician handed them over, and Jack inserted the key, pressing the start button. The Aventador roared to life, its V12 engine growling with a deep, resonant power that filled the showroom. Heads turned as the thunderous sound echoed off the marble walls, commanding attention. Jack let the engine idle for a moment, a small smile playing on his lips as he listened to its purr. Beautiful, he murmured, almost to himself. Mark stepped forward, his tone measured. Impressive machine, isn't it? Jack nodded, his gaze steady. That it is. Sarah finally snapped, her frustration boiling over. This is ridiculous. Mr. Lawrence, he's just here to waste our time. Do you really think he... Sarah, Mark said sharply, his patience clearly wearing thin. He turned back to Jack. Mr. Reed, if you don't mind me asking, what line of work are you in? Jack leaned back slightly, his hands still resting on the steering wheel. I work with technology, he said simply. Mark raised an eyebrow. Technology? Yep, Jack said, his tone casual. Built a few things over the years. Did all right for myself. Mark's curiosity deepened, but before he could ask another question, Jack turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. He stood tall, his demeanor as calm and collected as ever. Well, Jack said, looking at Mark, if you're satisfied with the test, I'd like to move forward. Mark blinked. Move forward? Yeah, Jack replied. Let's talk paperwork. I'll be paying cash. The room went silent. Sarah's mouth fell open, her face pale as she processed what Jack had just said. The other customers, previously engrossed in their own business, were now openly watching the scene unfold, their expressions ranging from shock to intrigue. Mark, to his credit, recovered quickly. Of course, he said smoothly. Let's step into my office and get everything sorted. Jack nodded, glancing briefly at Sarah before following Mark toward the back office. Her face was a mix of humiliation and disbelief, and for the first time, she seemed at a loss for words. The showroom buzzed with whispers as Jack walked away, his unassuming figure now carrying an undeniable aura of authority. Mark Lawrence led Jack Reed into his office, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Miami's skyline. The desk was made of polished mahogany, and the sleek chairs upholstered in fine leather. The decor exuded an air of sophistication, much like the rest of the dealership. Mark gestured for Jack to take a seat. Please, Mr. Reed, have a seat, Mark said, his tone professional but warm. Jack settled into the chair with a calm demeanor, his posture relaxed. Mark, however, couldn't help but study him for a moment longer. Jack's worn attire and quiet mannerisms were a stark contrast to the usual clientele. Yet there was something about him, an unmistakable confidence, as though he were in complete control of the situation. Mark cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Now, about the Aventador SVJ, he began, pulling a set of documents from a drawer. I have to admit, cash transactions of this magnitude are uncommon, but not unprecedented. May I ask how you'd like to proceed? Jack leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the armrests. I'll be paying in full, he said simply. No financing, no checks. Cash. Mark's eyebrows lifted, but he quickly masked his surprise with a nod. Understood, he said smoothly. We'll prepare the paperwork right away. Outside the office, The showroom had grown quieter, though the air was thick with curiosity. Sarah Evans hovered near the reception desk, her arms crossed tightly. Her earlier confidence had eroded, replaced by a mix of confusion and resentment. Customers whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding scene. As Mark's assistant entered the office to finalize the documents, Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression as unreadable as ever. "So, Mr. Reed," Mark said, attempting to make casual conversation. "You mentioned you work in technology. May I ask what kind of work you do?" Jack smiled faintly, his eyes glinting with a trace of amusement. "Let's just say I've built a few things over the years. Nothing fancy, but they worked out all right." Mark chuckled lightly. "Well, given your interest in an Aventador SVJ, I'd say they worked out more than all right." Jack didn't respond immediately, his gaze drifting to the window for a moment. "I've always liked building things," he said finally. "Figured out early on that if you solve problems for people, the rest takes care of itself." Mark nodded thoughtfully. Wise words. As the assistant returned with the completed paperwork, Jack glanced over the documents with a sharp, practiced eye. He signed with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before, his movements deliberate and composed. "All set," Mark said, extending a hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. You're now the owner of one of the finest vehicles ever made." Jack shook his hand firmly, a small smile playing on his lips. "Much appreciated." As they stepped out of the office and back into the showroom, the tension that had gripped the space earlier seemed to dissolve. Mark walked beside Jack, his demeanor respectful, while Sarah watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. "Sarah," Mark called, his tone neutral. "Could you arrange for the Aventador to be prepped and ready for delivery?" Sarah hesitated, her face flushing with embarrassment, but she quickly nodded. "Of course," she said tightly, avoiding Jack's gaze as she hurried off. Jack watched her go, his expression calm but thoughtful. He turned to Mark. "She's a bit sharp around the edges, isn't she?" Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sarah's ambitious, but sometimes that ambition clouds her judgment. I'll be having a conversation with her about today." Jack nodded, his eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "Might be worth reminding her not to judge a book by its cover." Mark smiled faintly. "I think today was a lesson in itself." As the Aventador was brought to the front of the dealership, its golden yellow paint gleaming in the sunlight, Jack stepped forward. He ran a hand along the sleek body of the car before opening the driver's side door and sliding in. The interior fit him like a glove, the handcrafted leather and cutting-edge technology, a testament to the craftsmanship behind the vehicle. Jack turned the engine on, and the V12 roared to life once again, filling the space with its symphony of power. Spectators watched in awe as he adjusted the controls with the ease of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Mark approached the driver's side window. "Enjoy the car, Mr. Reed, and if there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to reach out." Jack nodded. "Appreciate it, Mark. You've been more than fair." With that, Jack shifted the Aventador into gear and eased it out of the dealership, the engine growling as it rolled onto the street. Customers and staff alike watched in silence, their gazes following the car until it disappeared into the Miami traffic. Inside the dealership, Sarah stood frozen, her face pale. Mark glanced at her, his expression neutral but firm. "You might want to reflect on how you handled today," he said simply before walking away. Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of her misjudgment settling heavily on her shoulders. As Jack Reed glided the golden yellow Aventador out of the dealership's main hall and parked it momentarily near the front, the engine hummed like a contented beast. The tension in the air was almost as audible as the V12's purr. Sarah Evans stood rigidly at the edge of the room, frozen in a mix of disbelief and humiliation. Customers whispered in hushed tones, their earlier amusement at Jack's modest appearance now replaced by awe. Jack stepped out of the car with the same calm confidence he'd carried since walking through the dealership doors. He removed his worn cap, revealing neatly combed silver-streaked hair, and turned to face Mark Lawrence, who had followed him outside. "Mark," Jack said evenly, This car's a masterpiece. It's not every day you find engineering like this. Mark smiled faintly. It's why we're proud to represent Lamborghini. But I think today, Mr. Reed, we're the lucky ones, to have someone who appreciates the finer details. Jack gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then turned his gaze back toward the Aventador. He seemed almost contemplative as he ran his fingers over the door handle, his expression revealing a glimmer of something deeper than pride. Gratitude, perhaps, or satisfaction. Sarah, meanwhile, had edged closer, though she made no move to speak. Her face was pale, and her earlier sharpness had melted into an obvious discomfort. She watched helplessly as Jack casually reached into the back pocket of his worn jeans and pulled out a thick envelope, its contents a neat stack of crisp $100 bills. The sight was almost surreal. For a moment, even Mark hesitated, blinking at the sheer simplicity of Jack's gesture. Customers who had gathered near the dealership's large glass windows stared openly, their jaws dropping as Jack handed the envelope to the dealership's assistant manager. "Should be all there," Jack said with a faint smile. "Count it if you'd like." The assistant manager, wide-eyed, nodded quickly and took the envelope with trembling hands. He retreated toward the cashier's desk to verify the amount, leaving an almost stunned silence behind. Jack turned back to Mark. "Nothing like closing a deal the old-fashioned way, huh?" Mark let out a short laugh, his respect for Jack growing by the second. "That's certainly one way to make an impression." As the transaction was finalized and the dealership staff scrambled to process the paperwork, Sarah finally found her voice. She stepped forward hesitantly, her earlier arrogance now replaced by a nervous vulnerability. "Mr. Reed," she began awkwardly, avoiding his direct gaze. I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you earlier. I misjudged you, and that was unprofessional of me." Jack turned to her, his expression calm but unreadable. He studied her for a moment before responding. "Takes character to admit when you're wrong," he said simply. "But remember this, people aren't always what they seem. Judging someone by how they look can make you miss out on a lot." Sarah nodded quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "You're absolutely right. I'll keep that in mind." Mark, sensing the awkwardness of the exchange, stepped in smoothly. "Mr. Reed, on behalf of the dealership, I want to personally thank you for your patience today. It's not every day we meet someone as unique as you." Jack chuckled lightly. "Life's full of surprises, Mark." As the final papers were handed over, Jack climbed back into the Aventador. The doors closed with a satisfying click, and for a moment, the showroom seemed to hold its breath. When Jack started the engine again, the car roared to life, filling the dealership with a sound that was both thrilling and commanding. With one last glance at Mark, Jack tipped his cap. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said. "The pleasure's ours," Mark replied, stepping back as Jack drove off. The Aventador rolled out onto the street, its golden sheen catching the Miami sunlight as it turned heads up and down the boulevard. Inside, Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel with a sense of calm satisfaction. The city blurred past him, but his thoughts remained steady. As he drove, Jack reflected on the day. The prejudice he'd encountered was nothing new. It was something he had grown accustomed to over the years, but he'd long ago learned to turn such moments into opportunities. He thought of Sarah's reaction, of the quiet shift in her demeanor after the truth had come to light. Perhaps, he mused, she'd carry that lesson forward. The Aventador's powerful engine echoed through the streets, a reminder that appearances were just that, surface-level distractions. The real value, Jack knew, lay deeper, and in his own quiet way, he hoped his story had made that clear. Jack Reed drove his new Lamborghini Aventador down the streets of Miami, its dazzling golden-yellow color shimmering under the bright Florida sun. The roar of the V12 engine turned heads, leaving a trail of admiration in its wake. But Jack's mind wasn't on the curious glances or the envious looks of passers-by. He was still thinking about the events in the dealership, the subtle nuances of human behavior, and the way assumptions could shape interactions. Back at the dealership, things were far less calm. Sarah Evans, still reeling from the confrontation, stood at her desk, trying to regain her composure. Customers whispered amongst themselves, and Mark Lawrence, the owner, was quiet but visibly frustrated. He walked over to Sarah, his expression firm but measured. "Sarah," Mark began, his voice low but filled with authority. "What happened today was unacceptable. It wasn't just about how you treated Mr. Reed. It was about how you represented this dealership." Sarah swallowed hard, her confidence shattered. I know, Mr. Lawrence. I just thought." "That's the problem," Mark interrupted, his tone sharp. "You assumed. You judged someone solely on their appearance and dismissed them without giving them the courtesy every client deserves. This isn't just about selling cars. It's about respect." Sarah nodded quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I understand. It won't happen again." Mark sighed, his expression softening slightly. "I hope it won't, because today was a wake-up call. Now, get back to work." As Mark walked away, Sarah let out a shaky breath. She glanced at the spot where the Aventador had been, now empty, and felt a pang of regret. She had made a fool of herself, and worse, she had underestimated a man who had turned out to be more than she ever imagined. Meanwhile, Jack had driven to one of his favorite spots, a quiet stretch of road overlooking the ocean. He parked the Aventador and stepped out, the salty breeze ruffling his flannel shirt. He leaned against the car, watching the waves crash against the shore. Jack thought about his life, his journey from a humble background to building a fortune through technology. He had always preferred simplicity, finding joy in the quiet moments and the satisfaction of hard work. The money had never changed him, it was just a tool, a means to live life on his own terms. The events at the dealership had reminded him of something he had always believed. You couldn't judge a person by their clothes, their car, or their address. Real value wasn't in appearances, it was in integrity, character, and actions. A smile tugged at Jack's lips as he looked at the Aventador, its sleek design a testament to human ingenuity. He had earned this not because he needed it, but because he wanted to celebrate the journey that had brought him here. Sliding back into the driver's seat, Jack started the engine, the car roaring to life once more. As he drove back toward the city, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world might be quick to judge, but Jack knew who he was, and that was all that mattered. Jack Reed rolled through the bustling streets of Miami in his brand new Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, the golden yellow finish catching the sunlight in a mesmerizing display. The powerful V12 engine growled beneath him. Yet inside the cabin, Jack's thoughts were calm, reflective. This was more than just a car. It was a symbol of the perseverance and hard work that had carried him through his life. As he cruised along the coastline, the ocean sparkling to his left, Jack thought back to the scene in the dealership. Sarah's judgmental attitude, the assumptions about his modest appearance, and the moment when she realized her mistake. All of it played in his mind. Yet, there wasn't anger in his reflection. If anything, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had built, one where he didn't need to seek validation from anyone. He pulled over at a scenic overlook, stepping out of the car to admire the ocean. The warm breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed, and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below added a soothing rhythm to the moment. Jack leaned against the hood of the Aventador, the sleek curves of the car blending harmoniously with the natural beauty around him. A group of young passers-by paused on the sidewalk, staring in awe at the car. One of them, a teenage boy, hesitated before approaching. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said shyly. Is this your car?" Jack smiled, tipping his worn cap back slightly. "Sure is." The boy's eyes widened. "Wow, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it up close." Jack chuckled softly. "She's a beauty, all right. But it's not just about the car. It's about the journey that gets you there." The boy frowned, tilting his head. "What do you mean?" Jack gestured to the Aventador. "This car's special, no doubt about it. But what makes it meaningful is the hard work it represents. You don't need something like this to feel successful, though. It's about finding what makes you happy and working for it." The boy nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Thanks, sir. I'll remember that." As the boy rejoined his friends, Jack watched them walk away, their excitement and enthusiasm a reminder of his own younger days. He had been driven by a desire to create, to innovate, and to build a life on his own terms. And now, standing beside the symbol of his success, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Sliding back into the Aventador, Jack started the engine, the roar echoing through the overlook. As he drove away, he couldn't help but think about the lessons of the day. Life, he knew, was full of surprises. Appearances could deceive, and assumptions could blind. But in the end, character, persistence, and humility always shone through. Jack Reed didn't need to flaunt his wealth or prove himself to anyone. He had built a life of quiet strength, and today was just another reminder that the value of a person could never be measured by what they wore or how they looked. As the Aventador sped down the open road, the Miami skyline glowing in the distance, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, it never was, but for now he was exactly where he needed to be. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.